Hey, good morning, my brothers and sisters. We're back on our anti-regulation talk, and I want us to talk about three issues now. And let me tell you why we talk about these issues, to remind each other of what the battle is really about, and to let your anti-regulation supporters really, are they supporters really? We're supporting no one here. But all those who are anti-regulation, to take note of our following, but also to have the pastors, especially in areas such as Ekurhuleni. What is happening in Ekurhuleni is criminal. We've received reports and we're preparing ourselves for a showdown. If all the allegations that have been leveled against the Ekurhuleni municipality are true, then there's a major violation of people's constitutional rights there. You know, it's difficult to talk about constitution, rights, human rights to a people not accustomed to those concepts. But now South Africa is a constitutional democracy, and the law protects. The law protects the most vulnerable. Don't forget, as I set out, I want us to talk about three things: association, evictions, and information. Okay? Let's talk about association. Okay? I'm going to give this little talk, but I'm also going to go into the four basic objections we have to the civil rights approach, even though their recommendation were rejected by Parliament. I wanted to discuss this still because we don't know what angle the new commission will take. Somebody said we should pray that we have commissioners who are sympathetic. I said, well, it's good to pray for that, but we should pray for their sake, not for our sake. Somebody said, hey, but you guys are just fighting legally and politically. This needs spiritual warfare. I said, you assume that you're not fighting spiritually. Jesus told us to pray privately. But the Bible says faith without works is dead. So do not assume just because we're raising issues politically and legally, we have no spiritual backing. But here is my point. One, the association. You see, the South African Constitution gives every citizen, not religious people, the freedom to associate, the freedom to group themselves, the freedom to belong on a voluntary basis. Association cannot be dictated to. There is no law in South Africa that says, as a citizen, I need to belong to a group of people for the protection of my constitutional rights. We're not talking about professional affiliation. Each discipline has its own affiliated bodies. But even that is voluntary. If you don't want to be part of that, you may choose a different profession. We're not talking about professional affiliation. We talk about freedom of association at a personal level. Do not forget, according to our constitution, you don't have to be organized to be recognized. You don't have to be institutionalized to have rights. There is no law at all that says a Christian needs to belong to a church to practice their faith. Let that sink in. The Bible tells Christians not to neglect fellowship, but the law does not force anybody to belong to a church to exercise that right. Don't forget that there is not a single group right in the Constitution. Not a single. No right is given to a group of people. Rights are given to individuals. So as a believer in Christ, somebody else is a believer in Allah, somebody else is a believer in Hinduism, somebody else is a believer in Baha'ism. Whatever your belief system is, there is no provision in Parliament, in the Constitution, that you can only practice it if you belong. I can start a religion today. On the 15th of July, 2019, I can start a religion. What is a good example? Dr. Nala there. He started his religion. They call themselves the Plantians. Now, according to the Constitution and according to the Constitutional Court, it does not matter how strange that sounds. It does not matter how stupid that sounds. It does not matter how unconventional that is. They have a right to do so. But then, when it comes to an individual, I can sit here in my garden, and instead I'm starting a Chiism after my name. I'm Chi, by the way. I don't know why they give me such a crazy name. I could start a religion and I could be its only adherent. I could be the only person in South Africa who believes in that, and that would still be a right. Because this is a constitutional democracy. Now, the impression created by various church groups that you are only protected constitutionally because you belong to them is deceptive and is a lie and is illegal. First of all, a believer is under no obligation to belong to a church. A church is under no obligation to belong to a congregation. A congregation is under no obligation to belong to an organization. And that is why when Towa Kaluva and company brought their argument before Parliament, Parliament said this is unconstitutional. Let me go through that. Okay? The Civil Rights Commission is an institute of the state. So their proposal for the grouping of the religious community under the Civil Rights Commission was a violation of the freedom of association. Now, they were saying, this is what they were saying. They were saying various Christians must belong to a church, and that church should belong to an umbrella body. An umbrella body should be accountable to a peer review structure, and that peer review structure should ultimately report to the Civil Rights Commission. Everybody who is going to lie to you by saying, we don't believe in regulation, but we believe in self-regulation, they are delusional. Self-regulation is regulation, because self-regulation was never thrown around until it was coined in by the Civil Rights Commission. The church never spoke self-regulation until the Civil Rights Commission made noise about it. So it is a state-instituted concept which could only find embodiment and fulfillment within a state-controlled church, state-controlled religion. But don't forget this. While everybody is talking about the regulation of religion, every proposal the Civil Rights Commission put before Parliament had to do with church, not the religious community at large. They said nothing about the Muslims. They said nothing about the Jews. They said nothing about the Hindus. They said nothing about the Baha'is. So you could already see where their argument was drifting towards. They are not interested in controlling religion. They're interested not even in controlling Christianity. They're interested in controlling charismatic Pentecostal. You hear how they throw around words like, you mean anybody can just pitch up a tent there? Yes, they can, because they have a right. In the eyes of a secular state, there is no difference between a birthday party and a church service. So if you say to me, yeah, we can't live with a situation where anybody can just wake up and pitch up a tent to have church, then we should say, we should come with a rule that precludes everybody from pitching up tents. I wake up on Sunday morning, I pitch up a tent because I want to have church. My neighbor wakes up on Sunday morning, he pitches a tent because he wants to have a party. What is the difference between the two? The difference comes in when my neighbor and I are not complying with bylaws, not biased bylaws. The law that applies to the party goer must apply to the church. Now, we could meet in a restaurant and we will still be church. I could meet, as a matter of fact, constitutionally and biblically. I could belong to no congregation. I'm a father of 4. My wife and I have 4 kids. We have a daughter-in-law and a granddaughter. Now, we could decide to start the Church of Begonia. We don't need a constitution for that. We don't need an NPO for that. We don't need an affiliation for that. We do not need a bishop for that. Every day, my family could have church in our house. And that will still be a church constitutionally and biblically. Now, don't let your pastors fraternals lie to you. If what we hear about Ekurhuleni is correct, then something unconstitutional is happening there. They are saying, these are the allegations, that the municipality has come with a code of laws there, and you actually have to belong to a faith-based organization. You know what they say, interfaith. You have to belong to a pastor's fraternal before you can be allocated land. Land is not a religious matter. Land is a constitutional matter. Land is not a church matter. Land is a constitutional matter. And land is a human rights matter. Anybody who lives in this land, who is a citizen of this land, may not be denied land. It's also in the Freedom Charter, by the way. So we must understand fully the issue of association. You have the freedom to associate with those you identify with, but you have equal freedom not to associate with anybody. And your constitutional right to association will still be upheld. Now let's move into the issue of evictions there quickly. We hear that in Ekurhuleni there and around the country, you could be having a church service and there would be a demolition team outside there because you pitched your tent in the wrong place. That's against the law. Because there is an Eviction of Illegal Occupants Act, which binds anybody who thinks anyone occupying any land illegally to a legal process where the eviction cannot take place with an eviction order. Anybody about to be evicted cannot be surprised by the eviction according to the South African law. There is a procedure that even protects people who occupy land illegally. The court should make that determination. Right now, if I find that you have pitched a tent in my house while I went to Bloemfontein, a tent in my yard, I need to activate a legal process so that you are removed legally. And that is why if you move around the country, rightfully or wrongfully, you see all these farmers erecting high walls, barbed wire, and protecting, because it's a hassle to remove people from your land, even if you have a title deed. So what the allegations we hear coming from the Ekurhuleni, if they are correct, then there's something illegal happening there. You cannot be surprised by your eviction. So if you've pitched up a tent in a wrong place, then you can only be removed by a court order. Listen to me, my dear preachers. Do not be gullible. Do not fall for manipulation. This is a constitutional democracy, and rights are protected here. We have one of the most, at some stage, it was the most progressive constitution in the world. Know your rights. Let me tell you what the problem is. The problem we see bullying by faceless people, bullying by government agencies, bullying by politicians and church people with ulterior motives is the South African black is used to victimization. We come from a culture where we had no rights. And the people are still operating from apartheid programming, where they are shunted back and forth without resistance. We come from a very inhumane system. If you're not here before 1990, you'll never understand what you say. We were treated like dogs, nobodies. We had no rights. We were trampled underfoot. We were bullied. And all these things were happening because we had no rights. Now we have rights. And that is why some of us are very disappointed with institutions such as the Human Rights Commission and the Civil Rights Commission. Institutions were supposed to have gone out to empower the people. They were supposed, instead of investigating stupid, unfounded allegations, the Civil Rights Commission was supposed to have gone on the road to let the cultural, the religious, and linguistic communities know what their rights are. But they would never do that because they were intent on trampling those rights underfoot. You may not be evicted without a court order. Somebody cannot rock up at your door, knock, give you proof that they own the house and say out. Because the Constitution gives us right. And the law gives effect to the Constitution. Various laws give the effect to the Constitution. You may not be. You may not be evicted without an order. And let's move to the last aspect before I read here. Information. There is a Protection of Private Information Act. Anybody who demands from you personal information must have the authority to do so. And in a lot of instances, you can even say, go and carry on. To me, it's a very simple thing. If you think you have a right to force me to give you personal information, go to the court and get a court order, slap me the court order, and I give you the information. Now, when the Civil Rights Commission set out, they were forcing people, come bring a bank statement. They can't do that. The disclosure of my organizational and personal financial information is protected by law. When you go to any company and you submit your curriculum vitae and all that, that company has no right to take that information and give it to third parties without your consent. Your personal information is protected. That is why the bank cannot divulge your bank statements to anybody not authorized to access them. And that is why you sign a form there. I'm requesting this. Let me tell you what the joke is. We have about 11 congregations within Shimikoti Ministries. But because the 14 of us missionaries don't draw salaries from the church, we've never drawn salaries from the church since this ministry started in 1995. We all work, we all get money somewhere. The only obligation we all have together is we share the costs, rental costs, transport costs, but everybody gets their own salary. There is not a single branch where I have access to the finances unless the people authorize that. Let that sink in. We are not signatories. The people, various committees, they are in charge of various accounts. Now, the umbrella body, Shimikoti, as a matter of fact, the umbrella body is the African Missionary Alliance. And even though Shimikoti Ministries is in a lot of accounts, I walk into a bank with a Shimikoti ID and the bank refuses to help me because I'm not a signatory to the account. That's how tightly protected a disclosure of information is in South Africa. I walked to the teller and said, no, but this is me, Shimikoti. You can see, but they say, yes, there's a difference between Shimikoti and Shimikoti Ministries. And you may not access that. Do not be bullied. Do not be bullied. Either by government, faceless people, obscure people. Let them make noise. That is why I made an example that when the Civil Rights Commission forced Mboro and forced Chris Yokilome and other people to disclose that information, they said, no, let's go to court. They went to court and won the cases. We have to take seriously our rights or we are betraying the people who follow us. So in a nutshell, that's what I want to discuss with you. And I want to read this quickly. Why? It's because somebody from KZN asked me, what is the whole point? What is the anti-regulation of religion saying? Here is our point. It's only 5 points here. We say, our objection says, the Civil Commission as an organ of state proposes state control of religion. The Constitution defines the mandate of the Civil Rights Commission and is to promote, to protect the cultural, linguistic, and religious rights of communities. And it was never intended, either in terms of the Constitution or the Civil Rights Act, to license and to control churches. I wish that sinks in. The Constitution and the Civil Rights Act did not intend to license the Civil Rights Commission to control churches or to license them. It's outside their mandate. Togo Kaluve and company were recommending that, no, we should be in charge of the licensing process. And that is why Parliament said this is unconstitutional. The commissioners of the Civil Rights Commission, obviously, are appointed by the president. So whoever the president appoints will have ultimate power over the church to decide who can continue as a state-endorsed church That's the objection. That means if we allow the Civil Rights Commission to control church, that means the commissioners have the right to decide you're a preacher, you're not a preacher, you're not fit enough. What criteria are they going to use since this is a secular state? We say this potentially opens the door for government to silence the church from speaking out about issues which may implicate or negatively reflect the state. The church does not only have a commission to win souls. The church has a prophetic calling over government. And if the very people we can correct can license us, that means they're going to begin to silence us. Point number 2. The civil rights proposal would bring about a complete reversal of the historic relationship between the government and religious sector. It is a clear overreach of the legislative powers and prerogatives of the Civil Rights Commission as a Chapter 9 institution, which do not grant them executive power. Please listen to me. Even though the Civil Rights Commission is a Chapter 9 institution like the Public Protector, they don't have executive powers. You can never equate the powers of the Civil Rights Commission with the powers of the Public Protector. And that's exactly what they wanted. Their campaign to assume this function through the amendment of the Act is therefore an attempted power grab. Thus, the proposal is misguided, is unconstitutional, and amounts to state capture of religion. That's why we said no to them. That's why Parliament says no to them. Point number 3, we are saying the peer review committee will be dependent on and under the control of the CRL. Don't let people lie to you regarding self-regulation. These peer review structures they are setting up will ultimately report to the Civil Rights Commission. This is not self-regulation, but state control of religion. The Civil Rights propose that each religion has its own peer review committee. So, there'll be a single committee for the entire Christian religion. Then the Civil Commission claims that this is self-regulation. It can't be. Because according to the proposal of the Civil Rights Commission, these peer review committees are defined as advisory bodies to the Civil Rights Commission. Open your eyes, South Africa. This is state capture. In the proposal that the Civil Rights Commission has submitted to Parliament, the peer review structures that Reverend McCody and company were propagating for are just advisory board. They have no power. Their every decision regarding the licensing and the deregistration of churches would be vetoed by the Civil Rights Commission, which is a state, an organ of state. The report that they gave Parliament clearly states that the final decision and the powers lie with the Civil Rights Commission. That means the ultimate control of all religion is vested in the civil rights. Point number 4, the umbrella organizations which they propose in their strategy. Remember they say the preacher, congregation, umbrella body, peer review, then the Civil Rights Commission. The umbrella organizations will be evaluated on whether or not their doctrine or practices are acceptable, which is a violation of freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, and freedom of speech. The primary task of the peer review committee shall be to establish and license umbrella bodies, whose function shall be to provide special support, advice, oversight, governance, and capacity to build churches. But let me bring this to your attention. These structures, the peer review committee, is an interfaith structure. That means we must accept that part of the people who will decide if I should be licensed as a preacher or not are Hindus, Muslims, Sangomas, traditionalists. And lastly, we are saying the Civil Rights Commission is a violation of freedom of association, because nobody can be forced to belong to any association against their will. We spoke about eviction, association, information, and state control of religion. Decide if we are stupid or not. If you doubt us, go to the Constitution. Go to the the Eviction of Illegal Occupants Act. Go to the Protection of Personal Information Act. Go to the Bill of Rights and just peruse there. Go to the CRL Rights Act. This is Dr. Shimi Chi Aobakwe Kotu. We shall talk more tomorrow. May the Lord greatly bless you.